How did the Reformers see it? Did they use the time periods in the Bible? Well, I received an interesting letter, which I didn't go into details, but it's just interesting. The Geneva Bible, for example, was written in 1516. And there's a detailed record of the age of the earth from the time of Adam to Noah, Noah to Abraham, Abraham, Israel in Egypt, etc. And by the time it was 1560, how old had they calculated the earth to be? And remember, this is in the time of the Reformation. This is not in the time of Ellen White.
Correct.
1560 was the time of the Reformers, and they reckoned the earth then, when this Bible was written, to be 5,534 years and 6 months. I don't know how they got to that, but anyway, that's what they said. So this person fast-forwarded to 2020 to see how old would the earth be in 2020, and came to the conclusion, if you add the time there, that it would be 5,994. And when would the 6,000 end? And they arrived, you would arrive at 2027. Now this is just the Bible, not the spirit of prophecy at all. It's just coincidental. It's just an interesting point. Let's not make a great deal out of it. But let's look how the Reformers used this time period, or these time periods. The King James Version used the chronology of James Ussher, the author of the famous work, The Annals of the World. James Ussher was the Church of Ireland Archbishop of Armagh and Primate of all Ireland between 1625 and 1656. So some of the later versions would have footnotes of Ussher. Now, Ussher is not very well accepted today, in fact, quite ridiculed in some circles, but he was a very thorough scholar. And the calculations that he made are the basis of many Protestant thinkers' ideas on the cosmic week. And some people believe that Ellen White might have been influenced by Ussher's chronology in her statements. But her statements have nothing to do with it. They're very definitive statements. They do not, like Ussher, give specific dates for specific events. For example, Ussher will give the exact date of the creation, and he says it's 4004 BC, etc., etc. So let's not go there. But the fact of the matter is that the theologians over the history of the world have used the chronology of the Bible to determine where we are in the stream of time.
Yes.
It's just a fact of history. So how many of the church fathers, for example, believed in the cosmic week of history? So let's have a look, the cosmic week and the church fathers. So here's an article in Wikipedia. Early premillennialists included Barnabas, Papias, Methodius, Lactantius, Commodianus, Theophilus, Tertullian, Melito, Hippolytus of Rome, Victornius of Petau, and many of these theologians and others in the early church expressed their belief in premillennialism. In other words, Christ returns and then comes the millennium, right?
Yes.
Through their acceptance of the sexta septa millennial tradition. Now, what does that mean? This belief claims that human history will continue for 6,000 years and then will enjoy a Sabbath for 1,000 years, the millennial kingdom. Thus, all of human history will have a total of 7,000 years prior to the new creation. That's just history. So all of these church fathers believed it. Let's have a look at one or two of their statements, just to see what they believed. Irenaeus, who lived AD 120 to 201, he wrote, "For in as many days as this world was made, in so many 1,000 years shall it be concluded. And for this reason the scripture says, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all their adornment. And God brought to a conclusion upon the 6th day the work that he had made, and God rested upon the 7th day from all his work." Now this is very important. All of them linked this time period to the creation week.
Yeah.
and made the creation week a type of the cosmic week.
Yes.
So day 1 would be 1,000 years. Day 2, the next 1,000 years, etc. Day 6, the 6,000 years, and then the millennial period. This is how they all interpret it. And they used many scriptures in the Bible that they interpreted only in the light of this concept. Now, this is totally gone in the time that we are living in. Let's continue with what he said. So this is now a church father. This man was not influenced by the writings of Ellen G. White, because he had the Bible, and Ellen White didn't come for many years later. This is an account of the things formerly created, as also it is a prophecy of what is to come. For the day of the Lord is as 1,000 years, and in 6 days created things were completed. It is evident, therefore, that they will come to an end at the 6,000th year. The whole apostasy of 6,000 years, and unrighteousness and wickedness and false prophecy and deception, for which things' sake a cataclysm of fire shall come upon the earth. That's what he believed. These are to take place in the times of the kingdom, that is, upon the 7th day, which has been sanctified, in which God rested from all the works which he created, which is the true Sabbath of the righteous, which they shall not be engaged in other earthly occupations, but shall have a table at hand prepared for them by God, supplying them with all sorts of dishes. So he's referring to the millennial period. So Irenaeus believed in the cosmic week.
Yes.
6,000, 1,000. Here's another important one, Hippolytus. We're not going to go through all of them.
No.
He lived AD 170 to 236. And he wrote, "And 6,000 years must needs be accomplished in order that the Sabbath may come, the rest, the holy day in which God rested from all his works. For the Sabbath is the type," see, it was a type, "and emblem of the future kingdom of the saints, when they shall reign with Christ when he comes from heaven, as John says in his Apocalypse. For a day with the Lord is as 1,000 years. Since then, in 6 days, God made all things. It follows that 6,000 years must be fulfilled." That's what the church fathers believed, based on scripture alone.
Yes.
Now, I want to know, what did the pioneers of the Seventh-day Adventist Church believe? We know what many of the reformers believed because they included it in their footnotes, right? Yes. So now, let's have a look at some of the pioneers of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I know this should not be spoken of, but why not? If I can quote Irenaeus, why can't I quote Waggoner?
Exactly.
Would you have a problem with that?
I don't have a problem with that.
"And the prophet John wrote, the angel spoke thus, And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain. For the former things are passed away, and he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new." Now this is a reference again to the post-millennium restoration of all things. Eden is then fully restored. Here the river of the waters of life flows from Mount Zion. Here Adam regains the tree of life, planted beside the river, which parts into separate heads as in the beginning. Here again is paradise, the garden which the Lord himself planted 7,000 years before. This is what they believe. Here Abraham inherits the earth according to the promise. Here is the city for which he looked, every inhabitant of which regards him as a father. Here Moses will enter into that goodly land which he saw with the eyes of a prophet. Here David will behold his throne established, never more to be overturned, but to endure as the sun, even as the days of heaven. Here is the chosen company of those who were redeemed from the earth at the coming of the Lord, who overcame the beast and his image and the mark of his name, by strict adherence to the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus, in the perilous days when all the world was overcome with the prevailing iniquity. Clearly, He believed in the cosmic week.
Yes.
Thomas Preble, in his book, The Two Adams. Before the first Adam had the conflict with Satan in which he fell, the seventh day, or Sabbath, had passed. So with the second Adam, before the last and final conflict with Satan and his host, and which eternal victory will be gained for the Son of God and his people, the Sabbath, or 7,000 years, will be past. They believed it.
Yeah.
What about Joshua Himes? Signs of the Times and the Expositor of Prophecy. The world was created in 6 days. See, they all, like the early church fathers, link it to the creation week. Now, what is important to me in this is that you have this unbelievable link with the Sabbath.
Yes.
And if the Sabbath is the fourth commandment that prefigures a final rest in a cosmic day of 1,000 years, then the Sabbath gains in prominence.
Yes.
So this cosmic week idea lifts the Sabbath to an absolute status, and we can understand with more clarity why the Sabbath will be the issue at the end of time.
Yes.
And this is important to me. So the world was created in 6 days, and the seventh day God rested from his labor. 6 days shall you labor and do all your work. And then he quotes the commandment. And then with the Jews, every seventh day was a day of rest. Every seventh year, a year of rest or Jubilee. 7 in the Bible language seems a complete number. In 6 troubles, and he quotes a verse. I found this fascinating. In 6 troubles, the Lord will be with thee and support thee. And in the 7th, there shall no evil befall thee. This distinction we see carried out from the first chapter of Genesis to the last of Revelation. 7,000 years have therefore appeared to me as complete, and I expect after the 6,000 years of labor and toil, perplexity and suffering, the 7,000th will usher in the glorious Jubilee. And here's this verse in Job 5:19. He shall deliver thee in 6 troubles, yea, in 7 there shall no evil touch thee. And this is how they use these verses, not in terms of literal, but in terms of cosmic time. So in 6 troubles, that's the 6,000 years, he will be with you.
Yes.
And he will guide you through these troublous times. And in 7, there shall no evil touch thee. In other words, in that millennium, you will be safe in his rest. Isn't that beautiful?
That's beautiful.
It is beautiful.
I don't think this verse can mean so much if you don't read it in that context.
I have the exact same suspicion. This is what J. Clark wrote. Advent Review and Sabbath Herald. The Bible answers every query and solves every doubt. I like the way he writes. Yes. In this blessed book, the lover of history finds full information of past and future events, beginning with the first Eden and reaching over a period of 7,000 years to the second Eden in the earth made new. Here the lover of prophecy may be feasted with the words of inspiration, telling of scenes to come, the future history of our race and of the planet we inhabit. Here's another one. Now, I know I am being tedious now, but I think we need to make a point, and we need to make it very strongly, and I'll say in a moment why I personally, with my personal experience, feel very strongly about this as well. Josiah Litch had a lot to say about it. Oh, there were many. I'm not quoting them all.
No.
The most beloved preacher of the Advent movement was Fitch. And he believed exactly the same thing. So I haven't quoted them all, but this one I find very interesting. The first report of the General Conference of Christians expecting the advent of the Lord Jesus Christ. So that means there's a whole crowd of them, right?
Yes.
That's why I put it in. They all believed it.
Exactly.
Man was the last piece of divine workmanship on creation week. This finished, and a race of moral agents produced. God rested the seventh day from all his work which he had made. This coupling to the fourth commandment is a theme that runs through this theology. And as I said, the church fathers believed this.
Yes. So this comes from them already.
It comes from the time of
through.
Christ, as we can virtually say, to today. Let us then attend to the use the Apostle Paul makes of this act of divine procedure. For we which have believed do enter into rest, as he said. So what is he quoting here? He's quoting Hebrews chapter 4.
Yeah.
Where Paul talks about we have a Sabbath day, but he's referring to the rest that we will enter into, which is a reference to the millennial rest.
Yes, because a lot of people use that same thing now to say that the Sabbath is not, we don't have to keep the Sabbath because we've gone into rest in Jesus.
Absolutely, but this is a reference to this cosmic millennial 1,000 year period of rest. So in other words, and God did rest the seventh day from all his works. He's quoting Paul. The argument is that although from the foundation of the world a rest was provided for man, yet those and those only who believe shall inherit it. He also draws from the text, he quotes 3 inferences. That God's rest on the seventh day was typically prophetic. Now this is interesting. In other words, it wasn't a specific time prophecy. It was typically prophetic of a future rest for his believing people. So it was based on literal time and not based on prophetic time. It was a typological time setting. And that the rest which Joshua gave wasn't complete. Therefore there remains a rest for the people of God. Perhaps, however, it may be objected, although the Sabbath is a type of the future rest which remains for the people of God, yet it does not exactly follow that it is a prophecy of it. But let us look at this point. A type is an image and representative of another and subsequent object. Does not then the very idea of a type presuppose the subsequent existence of its antitype? It's a good question.
Yes.
Unless it does, it is no type at all. Hence, if the Sabbath is a type of a future rest for God's people, the promulgation of that type is a prophecy of the antitype. It follows, therefore, that prophecy and prophecy of a future rest for God's people began with the exercise of God's moral government over man, the seventh day from the beginning of creation. And to give the chronology of prophecy is to trace its history from period to period, from its origin to its consummation. So let us inquire then, more particularly what the Sabbath prefigures and predicts, because this is the issue of the end times.
Yes.
And the Seventh-day Adventist Church has consistently said that the Sabbath will be the issue.
Yes.
And people say, who cares whether it's this day or that day? Is it that important?
Yeah.
Doesn't this add prominence to it?
Oh, definitely.
So that it predicts a future rest for God's people, we have already seen. It has been an almost universal opinion of the church, both Jewish and Christian, that the Sabbath prefigures a glorious state of rest for the church during the 7,000 years of the world. Here he says it again.
Yes.
The principal arguments in favor of this are briefly as follows. God made the world in 6 days and rested the seventh, and constituted the Sabbath a type of future rest. So we may expect that after the troubles and commotions of 6,000 years, there will be a rest of 1,000 years from all these sorrows. The institution of the Sabbath and the Jubilees among the Jews has been considered typical of the same. The third argument is from 2 Peter, where he says a day is for 1,000 years. The fourth, I think, is the strongest argument. It's from the 20th chapter of Revelation, where he talks about the 1,000-year reign. So if there is a specific time period which refers to the rest, the millennium, then there must be specific time periods for the other ones. That's his argument. So he concludes with this. With these remarks, I will now proceed to show that the chronology of prophecy as recorded in the Bible presents us with 7,000 years from the beginning of the exercise of God's moral government over man to the final period of the conquest of all God's enemies. And when Satan, death, and hell, with all whose names are not written in the book of life, will be cast into the lake of fire, which is the second death. That's what they believe. Here are a couple of interesting inferences. Adam died on the first day. Genesis chapter 2 verse 17 reads, this is how they thought. I'm just adding this for interest's sake. But of the tree of the knowledge of the good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it. For the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. Now everybody says, but Adam didn't die.
Yeah.
So how do you interpret this? Well, they say, well, he really did die spiritually. But he still carried on living, right?
Yes.
Now how these reformers or these pioneers thought about it was that he was referring to the cosmic day,
Yes.
which is 1,000 days.
Yes.
And so the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. Did he die in the first cosmic day? The answer is yes. In fact, none of the antediluvians reached 1,000 years in age. They all died before that.
Yes.
So they all died within the first cosmic day, if you would like to call it that. Or this verse over here, Isaiah 6 verse 1 and 2. Come and let us return unto the Lord, for he has torn, and he will heal us. He has smitten, and he will bind us up. After 2 days will he revive us. In the third day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. Now, many would like to say that this is a reference to the resurrection.
Yes.
But you could also, as these people read it, say, after 2 days he will revive us. In the third he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. And so they would say that there must be a 2-day cosmic day until Christ returns. So that must be 2,000 years, and then will come the millennium.
Yes, the third day.
Now let me talk a little bit about my personal experience. Why was I interested in it? And I mentioned it in the first lecture. It's because of the evolution-creation debate. Why is it not popular to speak about this issue? Why is it that people are so passionate about it that you should not raise your voice above a whisper when you speak about these things? The church fathers believed it. The pioneers believed it. It's in disrepute. We spoke about why. We mentioned the LXX. The Septuagint is one of the reasons. The higher critics who ridiculed the Bible because it's not consistent, playing one manuscript against the other. We don't have to go that route. We have to determine there's a true line and there's a false line.
Yes.
And we stick to the true line, then we don't have to become confused by all of these so-called contradictions. And the third point I mentioned was evolution, correct? Now when I came into this church, I was also involved in the debate as to whether we in this day and age can really believe that God created the world in 6 days.
Yes.
And I am happy to report that this church confirmed that we believe in a literal 6-day creation, which is problematic in the world.
Yes.
But there's another issue that wasn't addressed. And that is, how old is the earth? And there were so many opinions as there were people available. So I came into the world believing millions of years. And then I had to suddenly get used to the world was created in 6 days. It was impossible for me. And then I was supposed to keep a Sabbath. Now, if a day represented 1,000 years, well, then the argument was maybe he meant millions of years. But everything would have been out of sync in the creation week. Everything's out of sync. The plants would come before the sun. Is he going to wait for millions of years for the sun to come to, and the sea mammals are in the ocean before the mammals actually developed and come from, everything's out of sync. So you either have to totally discard what evolution says. If you want to marry them, you have serious problems.